I saw the story on YouTube. You were playing a song for Bert. It was a great story. Could you tell me how you first met Bert?
Back before I even met him, I'd have to say that I think, yeah, before we heard Pentangle, my brother and I were big music fans and had been playing folk music since we were like 10 years old. Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul and Mary, and starting to listen to Dylan and stuff. And um, there was a record store down on at the time we were living down in Orange County, south of Los Angeles, and then there's a place called Balboa Island, and there was this cool little one of those cool little record stores where there's some guy there that knows the music and gets to know you, and there's all these albums sitting on the walls, and he would feature the ones that he wanted to. And I walked in one day with a quarter green, kind of a forest green corduroy sport coat that I'd gotten at the Goodwill for 20 cents or something. And he loved that thing. And he said, I'll trade you for two records. And so he said, these are the records you need to listen to. And one was the Traffic record, whichever, can't remember the name of which one, but one of the first couple. And the other was this blue record. It said Bert Jansch. And it was like, okay, fine, great. But he knew we were into, you know, music and guitar and stuff. So that was my first encounter with Bert, and we just thought this thing was it was so exotic, and the voice was strange, and the guitar was so sort of jazzy and bluesy, and it sounded kind of American in a way, but it also had this some traditional, something that sounded more like early folk music, Irish stuff or something. And so that was my first encounter with Bert. And then one day, a little bit later, we heard Pentangle on the commercial radio station in Los Angeles, the rock and roll station, with a great DJ named B. Mitchell Reed. And I didn't even know that was Bert, but we went. I called my brother upstairs, like, listen to this. What is this? And it was them playing, one of those from the first record, Let No Man You Steal Your Time or something like that, or Bruton Town. And wow, again, like, what is this? They obviously it was funky, and it had a groove, and it was rocking, and yet it was these weird traditional voices, and these stories, old stories. And so uh, that was probably summer of '68, and then in 1969, Pentangle came to their first tour. They came to the Troubadour in Los Angeles, and back in that day, in the Troubadour, you'd play like Tuesday through Sunday. That was the contract, and you'd play two sets, I guess, 2 sets a night. And so I was living about 6 hours north, up in the Monterey area at the time, but I hitchhiked down, left my high school. I think I got a note from my mom that I was going to be sick or something, and hitchhiked down, and I just started going in. We started seeing him once or twice a night. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and finally at one point, we'd wait in line and get the first get in first in line, so you could get the table that was actually touching the stage, and so your head was like at the level of their knees or their ankles, and you're looking right up at these guys playing their guitars. And of course, one of them was Bert. And eventually, Jackie, female singer, Jackie said, you've been paying your $7 all week long. How can you afford this? Why don't you just come around backstage tomorrow, and we'll let you in. And I think that's the way it went. Anyway, that's where we met. And I was just such a fan. To me, it was like talking to the Beatles or something. To us, it was a huge thing. And that was that's our first encounter. And I gave them like a ridiculous, 16-year-old that I was. I gave the last night on Sunday night before I left, I gave them my address and phone number. Maybe not even my phone number. Maybe it was my address. In this gated community in the woods, 370 miles away. And I said, well, if I can do anything for you, man, I'll just call me, man, or, whatever right, stupid thing a kid would do. And, stick it in their pocket, and I figured probably threw it away. But on my way back up hitching, I seriously did get sick, and I had a cold, and I was home again from another week from school. And sure enough, one afternoon, I was sitting there in my robe and pajamas, and these two station wagons come in. Who's coming in nobody comes in this. Like I say, it's a 17-mile drive. It's a gated community, and you got to pay to go in. And then even people that we tell them where to go, they would get lost and never found it. These people came in. They said, well, we were just driving by. I'll never know. I mean, I guess I could ask Jackie. What the hell? She wouldn't remember them, probably. So there they were, the whole band: John Renborn, Bert Jansch, Danny Thompson, the bass player, and Terry Cox, the drummer, Jackie McShee, the singer, and is it Billy or Bobby, one of their road managers, anyway. Two big station wagons on their way to the Fillmore West to open for the Grateful Dead. Stopping by to say hi, and they had tea, and my mom fixed us tea, and they said, well, are you coming to the show next weekend? I said, well, yeah, sure. So that was my next encounter, was the next weekend, and they opened for the Dead, and it turned out to be, it was that 4-day stint at the Fillmore West that's famous and infamous now for Deadheads, because it is what became Live Dead, and then I think there's 4 or 5 different incarnations. The last one being all 8 shows from 4 nights, and Pentangle were opening for all those shows.
So tell me about McCabe's Guitar Shop, how that came about for you and your brother.
McCabe's is this amazing little shop in Santa Monica, started by Walter Camp and Jerry McCabe, and I guess Bob Riskin, who became the manager later and the owner. And they started to put on concerts in the back room, in their little showroom. And it became just an incredible place. That, along with the Ash Grove in Los Angeles, were the 2 places where all the acoustic type people were playing. And so, Doc Watson and Flaco Jimenez and Peter Rowan and just, it goes on and on, the amazing people that played there. Bill Monroe and G.S. Sachdev, the great flute player. I mean, it was crazy. But we saw Bert there. That was one of the first time I went, was when Bert was playing. So again, I hitchhiked down. This was in the 70s now, and saw him, and started going when we were living there. Started spending more time there, and finding out that if I went and filled the flyer slots, they had these places where they put the flyers for each month at different restaurants and all these places all over LA. And if I did some of that, then I could get credit for tickets for going, and started helping them out. And pretty soon it was just okay to come anytime and hang out and go upstairs where the artists were playing and all that. Anyway, and my brother was doing some of that too, and he ended up becoming an assistant to Nancy Covey, who was the concert promoter, and later on became the concert promoter himself for about a dozen years. So that was McCabe's was our home base. At this time that we did the record, John was the assistant to Nancy, and they had booked Bert for one night or 2 nights. I think 2 nights, but I'm not sure. So that became part of what we were doing in getting Bert out here. We figured if we could book him a few shows, that would help offset the costs of the recording, because we had no deal, no record deal. We just were doing it.
And so the shows came out first in a way. Like, when did the idea for an album come about?
Well, okay, we had I keep going back and forth of where I was living because I guess I was bouncing a lot.
Sure.
In the late 70s. In the late 70s, I was living in Santa Cruz, Northern California, Central California, and my brother and I got an idea to put on some concerts, and basically Bert and Ralph McTell were coming through, and we thought how cool it would be if he could play in Santa Cruz. So, never having done anything like that before, I put together, found a venue and booked a thing with the, contract with the agents, and got Bert and Ralph to do a show in Santa Cruz. When we got to know Ralph McTell quite well through Bert, and Ralph came through and played McCabe's and was in Santa Monica for a while, and I was hanging out with him one night at a bar, and my brother and I had been talking about how great it would be to get Bert in a studio and have a really great rhythm section. And I mean, he made a lot of good albums. There's some really good things in probably all of his records, but what we really liked was the thing about Pentangle was that groove and that swing, which takes it away from the sort of the folky. It's not, what is it? I don't know, but it had a real authenticity, even though it was composed of different elements, jazz elements and blues elements and rock elements. And we wanted a thing that would we thought Bert was like kind of a rock star in a way, even though he's, very, very quiet and reticent in many ways. But so we thought, man, we just got to get a machine behind him, something, people that were really could groove. And he had not been he hadn't been doing that great of late in the late 70s. I think some of it was his drinking, and at the time he didn't have a record deal. And I was talking with Ralph McTell, and we were talking about Bert, and I said, God, it would be so great to just get him in the studio and with some really good people and just get something that's happening, I know we could do it. And Ralph said, well, why don't you do it? And I looked like, have another beer. But that was kind of Ralph's support of the idea that, just the idea that we could actually do something like that. So we started to, we called up Bert and said, do you want to make a record? And he said, okay, we'll pay for everything. We'll fly you out. And then we decided if we can book, 2 or 3 gigs one in San Francisco, one in Santa Monica, and we had ideas for a couple more, but I think we only had the two. So we that would help offset the cost. So and then we would pay for everything and send him home with $500, and then try to shop the record. So that was the plan, and a bunch of phone calls that, of course, back then were very expensive. A couple dollars a minute or something, and then we started to just figure out, well, where would we do it, and who would we get to play with him? And like I was saying, the key to a real groovy, to a groove and a feel, are the bass and drums. And if you listen to First Time I Saw Your Face on the Moonshine record, it's Danny Thompson, great upright bass player from Pentangle, and one of my great inspirations as a bass player myself. And Danny Richmond, who was Charles Mingus's drummer. And that was part of our, that's one of my favorite records. I mean, Rosemary Lane, it may be my very favorite Bert record. It's just so beautiful, and his playing is so amazing. But that idea, that was kind of the idea, to get a really good rhythm section. So we were thinking of, I'm looking at my old notes here. I got out my old book, and we tried to contact, or we did contact, Charlie Hayden and Billy Higgins. And Billy was kind of a free jazz, hard bop, Ornette Coleman, Don Cherry, Dexter Gordon. He played with Pat Metheny in Monk, and Charles Lloyd, he was very close with, and Charlie Hayden was just, also played with a lot of those, with Ornette and all that, and so we were going for this kind of a crazy idea, and that shows you what high esteem we held Bert in. To think that, well, yeah, that he deserves, the best jazz musicians in the world. So let's, we're in LA, so let's call him up. And I went and talked to Billy Higgins, and I brought him, I drove down to, he lived down in around 110th Street, like Watts, South Central Los Angeles, and, brought him Moonshine, and had him listen to it. And it was like something like that, man. And that didn't work out, and Charlie didn't work out. But we ended up getting a really good. We hired originally well, at one point we were going to get Alex Acuna, who's went on to be in Weather Report and played with Joni Mitchell and Paul McCartney and everybody. And he backed out at one point, understandably, because we weren't paying very much. But we got a guy named Matt Benton. Matt was Jimmy Buffett's drummer, and just a really all-around great drummer, good feel, really nice guy. And then we had an upright bass player who played with him. And the first afternoon, it was just, the idea was to get Bert and the bass and drums locked in, and then add what we needed, but to get the basic tracks live like that, and hopefully with a vocal. So we had Matt and this upright bass player, and it wasn't working out. It was the magic wasn't there. We were very disappointed. And the guy was sort of like, the bass player was like, it was a studio session, and he was, when we were listening back on the tracks and stuff, he'd be reading the newspaper in the back in the corner. And that wasn't our vision. Our vision was like, everybody is like, this is the thing. This is it. This is the moment. This is Bert. God's sake. This isn't just a job. And so that night we were going, what can we do? What the hell can we do? We got sessions. We had booked like 3.5 days that afternoon, and then we had 3 days to do the record, and we had no bass player. And I called up my great bass player, Lou Kabak, who was my bass teacher and had played with Gabor Szabo and was so I called him up, and he came by after his gig at like 11 at night, and we played a couple of the demos and had him play along, and that didn't feel right either. So, okay, thanks, Lou. We'll let you know, And now it's like almost midnight. So I just remembered that at McCabe's again, thank God for McCabe's, like the week before, I had seen the great jazz horn player, John Handy. And he was playing with this young guy on fretless electric bass named Randy Tico. And I was really taken with Randy's work. And so I happened to get his, not for anything but I was trying to collect phone numbers because I wanted to be a producer, so you got to know how to call people. So I took his number, and I thought, why don't I call Randy? So it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock, and I just called him. And I said, hey man, do you remember me? I met you at the McCabe's, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry to call so late. He said, no man, it's fine. I just walked in the door, just got home from a gig. And I said, well, do you want to do a session tomorrow? Are you free the next 3 days? And he didn't know about Bert, but he was familiar with Pentangle, and he said, sure, I'll do it. And that became our rhythm section. Randy Tico and Matt Benton. And then later, Matt could only make a certain number of days. The last day, I guess it was, we had a different drummer named Jack Kelly. And that was a recommendation from Alex Acuna. And he was also just great. And he did Heartbreak Hotel and Blackwater Side, which are definitely two of the most interesting kind of rockin' things. Anyway, goes on and on.
Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. So how did Albert Lee get involved?
Well, we knew we needed another instrumental foil for Bert. Like the John Renbourn, or he had Martin Jenkins previous, and on the L.A. Turnaround album, he had God, what's that great? The American Indian guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
he does
yeah,
that blues song that was a real interesting album, L.A. Turnaround, that Michael Nesmith produced.
yeah.
Michael Nesmith, formerly of the Monkees. Anyway, where was I? Let's see.
Albert Lee.
Just lost my train. Yeah, Albert. Thank you. So we thought, who is the best kind of multi-instrumentalists and the best guitar? Who's the best guy in the world, or especially in the Los Angeles area? And we figured it's Albert. And he happens to be English. That's not why we did it. But again, like a couple of naive youngsters, I somehow got Albert's number, and probably through McCabe's, and I called him and told him about the project. And he was between things. He had been working with Emmylou Harris and was more recently on the road with Eric Clapton. And he wasn't busy for the next few days, that week. And so, our deal was $50 a track per person. That wasn't it per hour. That was for as long as the track takes. Huh. If it takes an hour, it's $50 an hour. If it takes a day, it's $50 a day. And one of them did take a day. A couple of them took a day. At least one of them did. Blackwater side, I think. So that was it. Called him up and he said, sure. He said, I've never met Bert, but I know of him. I'm a fan of his work, and I'd love to do it. And there it was. So that was the essence, the essential band was Albert on guitar and Randy Tico at the very last minute called 9 hours before the gig on bass. Oh, and he lived 2 hours away. He lived up in Santa Barbara. And then Matt Benton and later Jack Kelly on drums. And then the only other person on the record is Jennifer Warnes. Mm-hmm. We also loved the Bert with a good female singer, like with Jackie, of course, and who's the woman on First Time I Ever Saw Your Face? Mary
Hopkins.
Mary Hopkins. Mary Hopkins, yes. And that was again another. That's kind of what we were going for with Jennifer. So she sings on Wild Mountain Thyme.
Yep.
And that's it. That's the lineup.
And that other guitarist we're talking about was Jesse Ed Davis.
Thank you.
Who had those solo albums that were interesting and played with all these people. He was he was great.
Right. He played on what's Open Up the Watergate with that slide guitar against Bert. Because Bert is a great, of course, say it's ridiculous, but of course he's a wonderful, amazing guitarist. But his thing again was groove. He'd get these grooves going, and usually it was almost all the lead stuff in Pentangle was Renborn, and Bert would just lay down these ridiculous chord patterns that just had a funk and a blues feel or whatever, and so that's why. Like Jesse Ed playing on top of that, or Albert Lee, seems to be a good idea.
So where was Bert staying when he was there with you recording and playing?
Well, we lived near a place called Barney's Beanery in West Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard near La Cienega. And so we put Bert up at the Tropicana Hotel, which is kind of an infamous sort of, I think it's in some of Ricky Lee Jones and Tom Waits's material. It was just a little kind of a hole in the wall, and he had a little room with his TV, and we would he definitely, and Ralph helped us a lot on some of these things. He said, try to get Bert not to drink before, sundown, and not during this is not a, this is not a party. This is a job. And, so we kind of took him under our wing in a way, which is kind of a ridiculous thing. But we made sure he got fed well, and we would, we tried not to give him beer money, basically. But we'd hang out the first night before the show, we started recording. We were hanging out at Barney's Beanery, and Heartbreak Hotel came on the jukebox. And my brother, who by the way went on to do a lot of amazing records that he produced, including John Hyatt's Bring the Family and some Grammy Award-winning music from the Blind Boys of Alabama. But John just said, Bert, you got to do this. You got to do Heartbreak Hotel, man. Bert was like, I don't know. I'm not an Elvis man. I don't. So he kind of worked out, and he figured out a little riff that night and said, okay, I've got a way. I'm going to do it. And he used, I think the riff, I think it's similar to the one, is it Mirage on the first Pentangle album, maybe? So he puts, again, one of those cool little Bert riffs, and then sings, Since My Baby Left, totally different than, of course, than Elvis. Found a new place to dwell, and then, so that was, finding the material was, kind of a joint effort. Ralph told us you probably can get one instrumental out of the studio, just a jam. And he was right. And that's what that last song tune, the instrumental that goes on and on, is called "And Not a Word Was Said," which it was Bert's idea, because he says in the pubs there was always, they'd be telling this story would go on, and these amazing things, terrible things happen or whatever, and at the end the guy would say, "And not a word was said." So that's a joke on the fact that it's an instrumental. But it was just them jamming. In the middle, Bert would started to play something, and everybody came in, and we rolled tape, and it went on, and it was very, very interesting and creative and exciting, because nobody, including Bert, had ever heard this music, and I think it was just one take. That was it, and not a word was said. And most of them were Bert brought in. Matter of fact, I think other than Heartbreak, Hotel, but there were a couple that he wanted to do that we thought were a little maudlin. Or there's one called "Lonely Little Girl" that was just, oh God, it's like just, and it was a part that we didn't feel we wanted, part of Bert's stuff that we didn't want as part of this record. And then there was another kind of an anti-war thing called, "Who You Gonna Kill? Who You Gonna Kill? Who You Gonna Kill?" And it was like, I might not go with this, Bert. He says, "Oh, they love it at the pub. They love it." Well, yeah, but we need to get you out of the pub,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll tell you, I don't think that Bert was in his finest form as a guitarist during this time. It's not his most beautiful, amazing work. Again, I think maybe, it was shortly before, I don't know when he actually gave up drinking, but it was somewhere in the probably mid 80s. And then he was sober for many, many, many more years until he died. And to his credit, he was an alcoholic, and he says it. He said, "I was a disease," and so I don't think it's the most fabulous examples of Bert's fabulous guitar work. He does some great stuff, but it was great to have Albert there. A lot of the stuff was Albert and Randy doing this amazing work on the fretless electric bass. And remember, it was the 80s, or we were, it was the beginning of the 80s, and when the fretless bass was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But Randy does some beautiful solos, and Albert does some great things, and they kind of weave with each other a lot. And I think that's part of what makes the album interesting.
No doubt. So there were some concerts at McCabe's itself that Bert did while he was there. Is that true?
Yeah, I think we did. I think we did three and a half days of recording, and that was all we had. And then Bert played the weekend at McCabe's. Played the weekend, or maybe one night, and then we drove him up to San Francisco, and he played the Great American Music Hall. I think with Robin Williamson. I think that was the double bill. And since we had been working with him, and we'd been working on these songs, we thought it would be a good idea to run a recording of the concert. And I'm so glad we did, because I personally see the original album was just the 10 studio songs, and that was put out by Logo, which was the formerly Transatlantic, that had all the Pentangle records and stuff, and then later Hannibal, Hannibal in America, I think, had it in America. That was Joe Boyd's label. Joe Boyd, the great, amazing producer and our mentor and somebody who we met because we sent him a copy of the Bert tapes. And he said, well, I'm not a fan of Bert Jansch, but I really like this record, which was a huge compliment. And we ended up riding around with him in London and getting his ideas. But anyway, when it was re-released, finally when did we do this?
I have that
Was
in
a
the other
few.
room. I have all.
Yeah.
I have the Hannibal vinyl, and then when it was on CD, and then the reissue CD with the live music, which is what I thought. Okay, now you've got a
Yeah.
great program because it's like almost like a documentary about the making of an album. You know, with all
Right.
that there,
Right.
amazing.
Yeah. We went to Omnivore Record. This was after Bert died, and we thought it was important to get this thing back out if we could. So we went to Cheryl at Omnivore Records, and she wanted, in order for people to buy, and it's more and more this way, but to get people to buy CDs, there needs to be some kind of package and an idea. And she wanted the backstory, and here's a package. She was great about box sets and that whole idea of getting people to buy. She did a lot of that for Concord and for Ryko, no, Rhino, that did some great, like Richard and Linda Thompson box sets and stuff she worked on. So she said, do you have any more material? And that's when I was like, I don't know if we have, oh yeah, we have a reel to reel. Was it any good? Well, I'll find a way to, get out, dust off my reel to reel and digitize it, figure out how to do that. And lo and behold, it's really, really good. So she said, okay, we can make it a two CD set. And I personally think that in the light of all these years, the just Bert playing live at McCabe's, that CD is much superior to our groovy studio thing that we put so much energy into, and it's good, but it's amazing just to hear Bert, there it is live. There's no overdub, there's nothing. It's just a 2-track recording. And he's so good. So that's my favorite piece of the modern version, the 2 CD set, is just Bert solo.
Yeah. And what was he like at those shows? So he's playing music, some of it previewing it in a way from the album, and some old classics. Um,
Right.
so, so he's recording in a few days, but the McCabe shows were either before or after, or even during the recording sessions, or
Yeah, it
how did
was
that work?
recorded June, this is 1981, so we were June 17, 18, 19, I think. Maybe, 20, because it was 3.5 days. And let's see, does it say 6/20? The 20th, that night, the night after our last recording session, we went over to McCabe's, and he was all warmed up, I guess, or worn out, depending on. Oh, by the way, it was also the hottest days on record for those days in June in Los Angeles. And this LA, at least back then, we didn't have a lot of air conditioning. It was never that hot. This studio had no air conditioning, and it was like 110 out there. And between takes, we'd open up the doors and blow air, hot air, I guess, in with the fan to keep it at least fresh. So yeah, we kind of wrung him out, and everybody else got sort of wrung out. And it was a little studio that had never made a record before. They were mostly, commercials, and the engineer, I don't think, had done a record. but it just sort of worked out. And when we got to Joe Boyd in London and we were wandering around looking for we flew to London afterwards and we looked for to try to shop it, to sell it to somebody, get our money back and get it out. And during that time, we contacted Joe Boyd. He'd heard the thing and he was like, "No, what kind of a floor is it under Bert? Is that? I bet that's a wood floor. Is it?" I said, "Oh yeah, it was a wood floor." I mean, we didn't know from nothing, but I guess we lucked out. And he was like, "God, that sounds so good." And coming from the guy who's done, Pink Floyd and, Fairport, all the Fairport Convention stuff, and Richard Thompson and Nick Drake.
Yeah.
And he's just one of the great ears of all time. We were quite taken with his interest in the sound of the record.
Yeah.
And if you listen, they don't use the word clerk in England. They use the word Clark. So he says the desk clerks dressed in black. He resisted that a little bit, and then the next morning he said, "Okay, I got it." That very Pentangle sound, that he found a way that he could get into it, and that was it was good of him to acquiesce to these fans who had known him since we were 16, and we worshipped the ground that he walked on, and here we were telling him what to do.
Well, let's talk about some of the songs. I'll just throw a title at you that I've got in my listing, and then anything you come up with is great. If not, that's cool, because I'll play clips of stuff or maybe some whole songs and see how it works out.
Sure.
So, let's start with "Is It Real?"
Yeah, we thought that was the best song that he brought to us. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song. Albert is a very important part of that. And Albert does a thing where he's got really good ears, and he's of course he can play as fast as just about anybody, but he'll often he played to the artist, and so he does some where he kind of doubles Bert, and then when it goes into the bridge, just kind of has this two feel, and you think you are, with the drums and the fretless bass. Yeah, I really like that a lot. That was that's why we started the album with that, because we thought that was the most catching and fetching song, although it's so slow that it's hard to think of it as being a hit, really. But it's a beautiful song. I don't know who it's about. I've always wondering, you sit, play with your guitar, you play your guitar, and you act like life is just a Pinter play with a happy ending you can explain away. But all I want to say to you, is it real? And is it somebody saying that to him? Or is it about somebody, you fill my head with words and clever songs. You act as though you were never wrong. Is he talking about somebody like Ralph? Or, who knows? I never asked him. I guess that's part of the beauty, is when you don't know everything, you can fill it in yourself.
Yeah. How about "Up to the Stars"?
That's one of my favorites. I really like that. And when we first heard him do it when he'd send us these cassette demos. Back then you couldn't just punch a button and send it. But there were no computers that were not the size of buildings. So the cassette, it had this, and I could just hear sort of a driving, and I'd sit and play my guitar with it in this kind of a strumming, 4/4 four to the floor kind of feel. And that's what we got Albert to do. So it's Albert's playing he's strumming acoustic guitar, just rhythm, and then he plays electric as an overdub over there, over the top of it.
Okay, next one is If I Were a Carpenter, classic.
Yeah, that's something that If I Were a Carpenter is something that Bert brought in. His idea of of course, a great Tim Hardin song. Tim Hardin's one of my very favorite writers. And it's what's interesting to me about, in some ways, is that the original Tim Hardin version is very kind of, it's got that dark Dorian D to C thing that really is more indicative of some of the British stuff, Bert stuff, and the Pentangle stuff. And Bert took it and made it into a little 3-chord song in G to the D7. If I were a carpenter and you were a lady, would you marry me anyway? And frankly, I don't like it very much.
Yeah.
If you listen to the two together, the Tim Hardin version is much more Bert than the Bert version, I think. And then we thought of having Jennifer sing with it, but it doesn't really have a chorus. And of course, it's written from a male perspective, and she didn't feel comfortable about she didn't find something she could do with that. So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. It's very pretty. The Albert's solo is just gorgeous on that, I think. And again, Randy Tico on the bass did a lovely job of making it melodic and harmonic.
How about the one with Jennifer, the Wild Mountain Time?
Wild Mountain Time, of course, is a famous Scottish folk song, traditional song, been done 1,000 times. And Bert found a hook that bang 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 dong dong, and the guys kind of worked on it together. The Randy and Matt, the drummer, they worked and kind of figured a way to use Bert's riff to build a track. And that's the kind of dedication that we were looking for. And why the other guy didn't work out is, these guys were like, they never met each other. And they're brothers in music immediately. And they're brothers with Bert immediately. And they just want to find a way to get into the song. And it was done. Jennifer did that as an overdub, her part. And first she was singing a little bit Scottish sounding, and I remember asking her to just try one and just be Jennifer, don't, be yourself, because we loved her. I just love her voice so much. She's so amazing. Of course, from those great duets that she did with Joe Cocker, was it Up Where We Belong, and what was the other one that she did? The other soundtrack from the films. Oh, yeah. But what was the other one? Anyway, she's a great duet singer, and so we really wanted to use her, and we knew her, and she did not work for $50 an hour, but she did work cheap for her. I think she worked for scale, union scale, which was still, half of what she'd normally ask for. And she was great. She just came in and did it. And I think she has 2 vocals toward the end to give a kind of a 3-part harmony thing. And then the fade out is kind of interesting to me because what Matt was doing with the drums is he kind of got a little kind of a marching, a very light, quiet, but marching, ding, 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 you know, and then it just kind of fades out. And the way we mixed it at the end was we take everything down, and toward the end, it's just like the drums.
Yeah.
So like they're going off in the distance, you know, and at the end you just hear the drums.
Yeah. About the couple of the rockers, sit down beside me.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Again, so much of what made it shine and what we were looking for was an ensemble feel where the music starts to take over, and everybody is part of the same. You know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And oh, Randy's bass playing is just, if you listen to it, it's just so melodic. It's like another voice. Um, and yeah, that's all I can say is that I think again, I think that one has a groove, and you know, that's what we were looking for. Um, Bert's voice is not a rock and roll voice, and some say it's a acquired taste. Um, I've always loved it, but you know, he's deeply Scottish in his brogue, in his voice, you know, and so I don't think these ever had a chance of becoming hit records, but I do think it has a groove that's just undeniable.
There's that darkness in Bert. When he goes down low, it's sort of hushed, you know, but it's personal for Bert. You know, you hear that personal darkness there, you know.
Yeah, and it's like the great singers that aren't great singers that are almost like their speaking voice, you know,
Yeah.
like Leonard Cohen or Dylan or you know, I mean, they're not trained, and Bert was he's if anything he's untrained,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of the juiciness. Not that he didn't work hard, he did. He trained himself. I mean, he worked hard. He did not just all of a sudden appear as a great guitarist or a songwriter. I think he had a real work ethic, and um, yeah, and yeah, "Sit Down Beside Me" is a it's a beautiful song. You know, it's he's saying, you know, and he, sort of like two people that have been apart from each other, and you know, it's been a long, long time, and you're looking fine, and you know, sit down beside me. Just something simple, something as simple as not having seen someone in a while, and you know, having your sweetheart, I suppose. Um, just sit down beside me. It's beautiful.
And then the other one I really love from the album because it has that sound, which I recognized when I heard it, not knowing what you wanted it to be, was No Rhyme Nor Reason.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that also is that has a lot of darkness too. There's Bert's kind of heavy, dark, and his the way he bends the strings and kind of sloppy and you know perfectly sloppy um, and I do believe, and I'm not listening right now, and I do believe that's one where Albert doubled him on electric guitar, so it has almost a sense of an part of it has a sense of an effect on Bert's guitar, like a harmonizer or a chorus thing or something.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I liked those two a lot when that album came out. I thought this is like kind of Bert in kind of rockin' Dylan mode, where you get some attitude on there, you know?
yeah, and he's sort of growling that.
Yeah.
He's kind of growling, isn't he?
Yeah, it's like he unfurls these kind of imagery in front of you, poetic imagery, dark poetic imagery on that song, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so what did you think of the how did the cover photo come about? That was a very unique cover photo of Bert.
Um, was it Claudia Cunin, I believe was her name. Um, she was somebody that my brother knew. That was my brother's input. And he was always much more of a visual guy than me. He always, all the stuff that he did, he always wanted to have a lot of control and input as far as the visuals. So we somehow during this same 4-day period, after one of our sessions, we went somewhere nearby because this was Silver Lake's is just east of Hollywood, part of Hollywood really. And we went to Claudia's house, and she had this background set up that you see with a kind of looks like clouds. And I don't know why. For some reason, I brought my guitar, which is a handmade guitar by a guy named Dexter Johnson. And so you're seeing a guitar that he doesn't even play. Now, why I thought that was better because it has more abalone than his Yamaha. And since he was a Yamaha recording artist, it probably would have been better if he had the Yamaha. Again, I think that was maybe my own vanity or something. I don't know. Here, take this guitar. Okay. And then Claudia, if you listen to what's that great film about Bert and the root of acoustic roots,
Yeah, I've got
Bert
that.
and all the early stuff, and Billy Connolly is um, the MC, the narrator on this, and takes us through everything, which is so great. Another Scotsman, and he holds up the different covers and he goes, "Oh, look, now they're playing Go. Oh, they're very intellectual." He's making fun of him, and of course, he was a huge fan of Bert, and was a folkie and a banjo player in
Mm-hmm.
Edinburgh and stuff long before he was ever an actor. And so he knew all these guys. But then he holds up the Heartbreak cover, and I'm just so honored that he said, "Now, here it is." And he did say that I think what does he say? Heartbreak Hotel's his favorite sort of mid-period Bert song or something. Anyway, I was very pleased about that. But he goes, "Oh, look, you can bet that's not his cape, and what have they done to his hair?" And it's true. He got it right. Claudia like curled his hair, whatever, brushed it around and stuck this black cape on him. And he let her do her thing, and we sort of let her do her thing. And you know, it's kind of weird, but I like it.
Yeah, it's like he's a Scottish monk playing in a castle somewhere. I thought it was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it's obviously it's kind of theater in a way.
Huh.
And Bert didn't seem to mind.
Yeah, that's cool. So there was some touring afterwards to promote the album, I saw.
Yeah, he and Albert struck up quite a friendship of sorts, and then when we went to we went to England, and we did this in June. Then in the I think September or something, we went to England and we found these people, Logo Records, like I say, the former Transatlantic Records, and they wanted to push it, and so they actually put together the tour, and they hired Albert, and I think maybe they did a tour with Albert and Nigel Portman Smith on bass, and maybe somebody on drums. Anyway,
I saw a poster for a European tour that had Terry Cox from the Pentangle on drums for that.
really?
Yeah, it was Albert, Terry
Oh,
Cox, and Nigel, and it showed the dates.
fabulous. Now I
Yeah,
wish I'd have gone over for those. That would have been great. Yeah, I wasn't involved in much of that.
yeah.
Because being back in Los Angeles and these were all in England, they didn't do any in the States as far as I know,
Hmm.
unless they did some in the East Coast. They might have done a couple on the East Coast. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how it all how this all came about, looking back at some of my notes and, like I say, well, we got to get a good rhythm section. So maybe we get Ornette Coleman's bass player and drummer, and
Yeah.
and then I have some place where I wrote sax question mark on. We had some ideas. We were thinking of getting him to redo "I've Got a Feeling" that they did on the second
Mm-hmm.
Pentangle record.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically a takeoff on the Miles Davis All Blues. And so I think that's where the saxophone idea came in, and I started to write down sax names, and uh, we thought of him doing "Who Knows Where the Time Goes," the great Sandy Denny song,
Mm-hmm.
that was also covered by Judy Collins, and
Mm-hmm.
that didn't work out either. I don't know if we didn't bring it to him or he rejected it or it didn't quite come about. Anyway, I thought that would have been very interesting.
Oh.
But what's interesting about the whole journey for me was, you don't know what you're doing, but you do have some sense. You got some sort of connection and love for the music, and a certain ear, and some ideas, and three-quarters of them don't work, and other things show up. Like of course we wanted an acoustic bass player, Danny Thompson from Pentangle, and it was this acoustic music and all that. And we ended up with a, fretless electric bass, and Albert Lee on electric. And I don't know if we were thinking about Albert playing electric at first. It was maybe just because he's a great acoustic guitar player. He also plays mandolin. Does he play mandolin on If I Were a Carpenter? And can't remember all, but yeah, it was kind of interesting how things, come together by you try something and it doesn't work, so you try something else, or you're on a deadline, so you do something else, and you can only afford a $35 an hour recording studio. So you go to that one, and it turns out to be something that Joe Boyd thinks sounds really great,
Yeah.
Um,
So there
so
definitely no.
luck plays a lot in anything. I think we
Yeah.
had some good luck and some not so good luck.
Well, the director Jean Cocteau says you can't have art without luck. So
Wow. Yeah. I think the real honest people that are successful. Um, Jackson Brown said that once to me too. He said, "Good luck," and then he turned around and he went, "I don't just mean, I'm not just saying something. It's really important."
uh,
And there's probably nothing you can do about it by definition, right?
yeah. Well, the I got the poster here. It says it started this European little tour they were doing. Was this April 24th through 29th? Started in Dublin Stadium.
Hmm.
And then one of the stops was April 28th, Radio 1 in concert, which was put out on CD along with the 13 Down Conundrum concert on Radio 1 as well. They kind of merge into each other, but when I bought that CD years
Oh,
ago
really?
as an import, I was like, that's Albert Lee, because I totally know that album. So I could tell when it shifted in the tracks, even though they kind of put it out like it was one show. Um, but it kind of, I wish they had just put out
Yeah.
more and have it a 2 CD or something, because to me it's totally separate. Um, but it's on there. A few songs are on there with Albert in this tour. So
Wow.
yeah,
I would love to. I'd love to hear that. I didn't even know about that, or either that or I forgot.
yeah.
Probably. I don't think I knew about
It
that
was an
that
import. I
CD.
think it was on Windsong.
Yeah. But Bert was he was just really a wonderful human being, and he was so kind to me from the first time that I reached out my hand and held it in my other hand and practically was in tears, and
Hmm.
said, "Thank you, I love you." And he was very, very kind, and a sweet guy, and I'm so grateful that I got a chance to hang out with him and shoot pool and drink some beers and help him create some music. It was one of the big honors of my life, and I'm forever indebted to him, and I miss him dearly.
Great. I appreciate that. Appreciate your time, Rick, and I'll get back to you as I get through this. And
I look forward to listening to it, Tim, and let's stay in touch. I'll look for your other shows too. I'm excited.
I appreciate that, and have a good gig tonight.
Thanks, Tim.
All right,
Take
thanks,
take care.
Rick. All right, man. Bye bye.